very musical. My full name is Stephen Grimes.
And
I refuse to divulge my middle name. I have gone through so many different kinds of music. I mean, not through them, I still like so many. Certain types of music I was heavily involved in, and then I couldn't do it anymore. I learned to dislike that music, and that one kind of music is country western. I played violin, mandolin, guitar in a western band, and sang, and I was done. When I quit the band, I was done. I never wanted to play another country song in my life. But I also played in a bluegrass band. I played fiddle and mandolin in a bluegrass band, and I still like bluegrass, but it's not what I listen to. I think then in my 20s I got into Brazilian music, and I really wanted to learn to speak Portuguese, and but I couldn't understand what any of the Brazilian singers were singing. So about 15 or maybe 20 years ago, I studied at the local college Portuguese, mainly to learn a second language, but also to be able to understand Brazilian singers. And so I love Brazilian music. It's still very evident in the songs that I write, some of them. But I like jazz, I like funk, New Orleans. I must have been born in New Orleans in a previous lifetime. I just love the piano players, all of the musicians, and the type of music that comes out of New Orleans. So and a lot of that is in my music that I write. So I think that those are my favorites. I would say R&B, blues, funk, jazz. I started this in '72, so I've been doing it for 42 years, and I still subscribe to the philosophy that the ultimate accomplishment is to blur the line between work and play. And every morning, I can't wait to get in here to see what I can do that day in terms of instruments. Coming up with something new. When each instrument, especially something that I've put 100, 200, 300 hours in, when it gets strings on it, that's like my birthday. That's a very special day for me, is when I ship out a guitar that I'm very, very proud of. I just sent the guitar to Portugal to a guy who plays fingerstyle nylon string jazz, and I made him an archtop guitar that was as light as a feather, and it just had this big voice, and that's probably the toughest guitar to make, because it's so an archtop guitar needs a lot to drive the top, and nylon strings don't have a lot, so you have to make it very light. No, I enjoy getting out. I like traveling, and I like recording. So I'd say, but that's music related. It was just a natural thing. I never even considered making up a name like Bob Gleason. I guess he didn't want Gleason on his ukuleles, so they say Pegasus, and that's a beautiful name, and they're beautiful ukuleles and guitars. But no, I just started off. I started off putting a G, and then I think about the people that influenced me were D'Angelico, had his name on the top. D'Acquisto had his name on the top, even though they were long names. I did. I had a couple of mentors. One is a guy that lives in Seattle. He never built a guitar. He is this Bulgarian guy who I think he must have made 100 instruments by the time he was 20 years old. He's legitimately crazy, but a brilliant musician and craftsman. He made silver flutes from a block of silver. He was just he was so good at so many different things. He was a machinist. He made beautiful violins. He taught me about arching plates and carving and whiskering the wood and tuning and tap tuning and voicing an instrument. And that was way back in '73. So I did have some guidance, but I was not working for him. And Jimmy DeQuisto, I've had lots of long conversations with Jimmy, and my friends, the people that I were my own age who were also in the process of learning, but everyone, as they're progressing, they learn different things. So, or somebody like my friend Tom Rebecki might be able to turn me on to a whole new way of doing guitar necks, how to attach them, or whatever. I might be telling him something about how I tune an X brace or move it slightly to the treble side. So we all share information and learn from each other. Well, I started out as a musician, and I mowed lawns. I just did handwork for people, menial work, and saved up enough money to buy my first guitar. And then I think I dropped it, something happened to it, and I thought, well, I gotta fix this. And I was good. I think since I was a kid, I've been good with my hands. So I just looked at this broken guitar, and I said, I'm gonna fix that. And so without a book or without a teacher, I just looked at it and thought, how do I do that? And I was able to fix it. And then a friend brought me his guitar. He said, oh, if you could fix that, maybe you could fix my Goya nylon string guitar. And so I fixed that, and and I was working for Boeing Aircraft at the time in Seattle, and I went through school in engineering. And then after I started working for Boeing as a draftsman, I realized I didn't like that kind of work. And so I just couldn't wait for 4 o'clock to roll around. But it wasn't that way when I was in my little shop making things. And so as soon as I started working on instruments for myself and for friends, I just thought, this is what I want to do. And being an engineer or a draftsman or whatever is not what I want to do. So that's when I started to focus on instruments. And I started probably a couple of years of repair before I started making instruments. Oh, I made a number, probably a dozen soprano ukuleles when I lived in Washington State. And that was 1976, 77. I made a tenor, and then I made a baritone. And I think that was it. Maybe a dozen, at the very most, probably a dozen ukuleles in the 70s. I made no ukuleles in the 80s. And then halfway, maybe in 95, somebody said, would you build me an ukulele? And I said, sure, what do you want? So he says, a tenor. So I made this ukulele, and I voiced it the same way I voice a classical guitar, not the same way, but same ear. And I just loved the sound of it. And that's when I decided to make myself an ukulele. And the red ukulele that I showed you earlier is the next one that I made. And I hadn't made ukuleles maybe 10 or 15 years, and then I made this tenor ukulele for myself after this one for a customer. And then I just went, this is great. And so I branched out. There's not too many archtop guitar makers who make ukuleles. I don't know if I have a very unique building philosophy. If I said my philosophy for building, I'm sure that every luthier would say, that's my philosophy too. And that is, but it's an art to finding the right materials and then using those materials to achieve the lightest and strongest instrument. You need strength, you need stiffness, but you need lightness. And so the best sounding instruments are made from wood that is both light and stiff. So some of it is tapping and listening, and some of it's feel. And you can tell so much about the wood of an instrument before it even starts to go into building the instrument. So I might find a piece of curly maple that is just beautiful, the best figure, the best curl that I've ever seen. If I pick it up and tap it, it might just sound terrible. If it does, I'll slice a piece off of it and then try it on something I can really hear it ring. And if it still has those same sounds or tones of deadness, of no sustain, no elasticity to the wood, I'll discard it. I had a piece of koa, which was the most beautiful piece of koa I had ever seen. It was the color of dark chocolate. And it just had this figure that ran through it, and I just thought, I can't wait to use this. And I sliced off a couple of pieces of it, tapped it, and I just went, no, I must be me. Did I have too many beers last night? And then I would take another slice, and I'd listen to it, and it was dead. And so I made peghead veneers out of it, where it doesn't matter. It was beautiful. It was too beautiful to throw away, but it was also too dead to use for tone wood. If I have an order for a specific ukulele, and when people place an order, they'll tell me how wide they want the nut, what string spacing they want it to bridge, how deep, how wide. Oh no, not how wide, not how deep. I should take that back. On a guitar, it's less, I can do that. But on an ukulele, that's one of the problems with ukuleles. So I see so many builders that build an ukulele, a tenor ukulele, it's 9.5 inches, and they think, well, you know, if 9 inches sounds great, 9.5 inches is going to sound much better. And it doesn't work that way. And so the amount of tension that you have in a ukulele 4-string instrument that's tuned to pitch is a certain amount. And if you add more mass to that, or larger area, it's like trying to get a good violin sound out of a bass speaker. To replicate the sound of a violin amplified, you want a tweeter, because it gives you that real nice, true high end. On a bass guitar, you can't play it through a tweeter. You have to play it through a big speaker. So it's like big ukuleles are like trying to play violin through a bass speaker in a kind of a strange comparison, but this is a batch. All 4 of these were started the same day, and none of them are orders. They're all, I'll go into my wood room and I'll go, okay, I want to make a Brazilian rosewood ukulele with a German spruce top, and so I'll start to build it. And Russ does a lot of the work in the early stages, where he'll sand the wood, bend it in the bending machine, all that kind of stuff, get ready, and then he's been with me for almost 15 years. He walked in the door when he was 20 years old. And so what he's still trying to learn is what I'm hearing, what I'm listening for before the back goes on. And this is another thing I don't understand. There's a lot of instrument makers that will bend the sides, glue the back on, and then glue the top on. But the top, when you're tapping the top and it's a free plate, if this is not glued to the sides, and I'm listening, there's the best spot right there. If I'm listening for the tone and I'm carving, it does give you a guideline, but that guideline changes as soon as you glue it onto the sides. But once the top is glued onto the sides, then you can voice it, and that's where it's going to be, because it's not going to be glued anymore, it's already glued. So I will do some of the voicing of a top, especially arch tops, glue it to the sides, and then when I have this glued on like this, and this is an open backed, you know, and then I can, once this is glued, then I can shape the inside and tune it to where it's going to be when it has strings on it. So that you could call that a philosophy. It's just, and it's a method that I never read about it. I've never actually asked another luthier, you know, do you put the top on first? But I've talked about it at lectures. You know, when you're trying to voice an instrument, you want the top already defined. You want it to be where it's going to be when the strings are on it. So you leave the back off and you tune the top, because the top is the sound board. I would probably choose, if I were going to build an ukulele, you're talking about, first of all, ukulele, tenor ukulele is my favorite size. I like baritones okay, concerts are okay, sopranos have just never held a place in my heart. Tenor ukuleles I like. So I like softwood top ukuleles, and I would probably go in there and choose Madagascar rosewood for the sides and back, with a cedar top or a redwood top, with a center sound hole. If I were making myself an instrument like you were talking about earlier, to use as a vocalist or with a vocalist, that's what I would gravitate toward. Koa also too, but Koa is a little bit brighter, and it depends on, I guess, the vocalist. But for my own personal taste, I like the softwood tops, like cedar, redwood, German spruce. No, I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
I can tell you who I would order an archtop guitar from.
Sure.
Probably Mark Lacey. He's I mean, he's well known, but I've played maybe 3 or 4 of his guitars, and I just thought that they were really spectacular archtop guitars. I would order a Favilla ukulele if Mr. Favilla was still alive.
Very
Favilla
quick bit.
all mahogany ukuleles, oh my God. And Martins sound really good, but the early Gretches and the Gibsons, they, you know, I mean, it's all a matter of taste. But and I used to have a store down in Kahului, and I would always search the used instrument websites for Favilla ukuleles. Just this big, warm sound. You know, Favilla. Each one of them is tuned to get the most. This is spruce. Same note, different sound.